Well, good morning or afternoon. My name is Roger Foote. I've been with the South Dakota Canoe and Kayak Association for a long time now. I forget how many years. During the summers each year, I try to host a river run somewhere in the 39-mile region of the Missouri River. I guide some paddlers along down through there, and this happens to be one of the pictures at Monfort during rather low water levels. But we do get a lot of questions about how can we tell what the water levels are, what is a river gauge, how do they work. I use these 4 websites, not exclusively, but a lot. If you guys want to take pictures of this screen and refer to these websites later, there's more ways to access this same information, but these are the 4 that I use. So what is a river gauge? In South Dakota and all across the country, there is a network of gauges on most, I'd say almost all major water bodies and a lot of tributaries throughout the country. And this is how we track the height of the water, how fast the water is going, the temperature of the water. Some gauges will take water quality data. Some gauges only activate under flooding conditions. This is the first. Why is this not working right, Pat? No. I need this down here as well. Okay. I know Pat's not a teenager, but he helps me out. This is the water at NOAA.gov. It's on there. Each one of those dots represents a gauging station throughout the system. And I was going to tell you what a river gauge is. At each point, you've got to measure from something. So the Corps of Engineers, the state, NOAA, whoever, has put in basically a yardstick, and that's way oversimplifying. A yardstick where they measure the water level on a day-to-day basis, sometimes an hourly basis, but that yardstick isn't necessarily tied to any other elevation but itself. So when someone says that the gauge is at 2.3, it's 2.3 feet from the bottom of where that gauge is set. It may have a datum that ties into a real elevation that correlates to the rest of the world, but most of the time when you hear of a reading, a gauge reading, it's just an arbitrary number upon that stick at that location. And they can vary wildly from north of Watertown down. Each one is on a separate gauge height. So if you see 7.2 in Watertown, that's a lot different from the 23.6 out of Lake Compesca. Does that kind of make sense? Or am I just confusing everybody even more? These things will also measure water flow, and that's done in cubic feet per second. On the Missouri, it's in the thousands of cubic feet per second. Up in the upper Big Sioux River area, it's just in hundreds of feet per second. It depends on where you are. And then, but please keep in mind, 32,000 cubic feet per second on the Missouri River, where it's a half a mile wide, is really a lot slower than that same cubic feet per second coming out of a dam on a chute. So the amount of water flows, it's how fast it's passing a certain point. And the narrower it is, the faster it runs. Hopefully that helped you. So these are the points in South Dakota. If you were to click on one of those dots, all right, so if you were to click on one of those green dots, this will pop up, or something similar as to one of the gauges that you selected. This one is on the 39-mile stretch of the Missouri River near Greenwood. When I'm hosting river runs along that area, I take a look at this, and you can tell from the marks on the graph that the water levels are rising and falling, rising and falling. This is due to dam operations and the amount of electricity that they're generating throughout a 24-hour period. I've got a little more explanation on that as we go on, but if you look on the right-hand side, it shows the flow in thousands of cubic feet per second. On the left-hand side is the stage, or the gauge height. This one starts out around 24 feet, and then the average goes up to the highest point at 25.9, and then you can see the chart as it drops back down again. The Corps controls the dams, of course, not only for flood control but electricity generation. They don't need to generate as much at night as they do during the day, so you'll get fluctuations in the channel. What that relates to as a paddler is that when you start out in the morning, the water may be 2 feet lower than when you quit that afternoon or evening. This is important as to where you park your pickup. Yeah. Don't ask me how I know that. So this is, and as you use this system and you paddle a certain area that you're familiar with, you'll be able to kind of judge, okay, the river levels are running at 25 or say 32,000 cubic feet per second. You'll know that at 22 cubic feet per second, there's a lot of sandbars, lots of dirt exposed, the banks are tough to get down to. As it comes up to the 36 level, a lot of the sandbars disappear, there's not going to be as many places to pull off, and everybody's going to want to pull off for lunch sooner or later, so you may be in a bunch of Phragmites. But that's why I use this particular gauge for those trips. Now the Big Sioux River Information System, or Flood Information System, the state started this, I want to say in 2011 they started putting this together, and it's based off the Iowa model. But as the flooding in the Big Sioux, they started this to give you more information on what's going on. These are all the monitoring points from north of Watertown all the way down to Sioux City. And as water levels change and heights change and flood information comes in, those will change colors from blue to red, yellow, green as the danger levels or just current conditions of those locations. If you were to click on one of those, and this is Split Rock Creek, I did this yesterday, so this is fairly current. You can see from the outlet or the pop-out boxes, no flood alerts. It gives you a gauge height or stage height around 3 feet, and from looking on Facebook on our webpage, some people have discussed that the best water levels to paddle Split Rock is between 2.5 to 3.5 feet. So right now would be great, but it'd be a little chilly to do that. It also shows all the watershed that drains down to that point. You can see the shaded area. And this works for every single gauge site up through the Big Sioux system. If you're curious about just one little area, you can zoom into that, click on the nearest gauge. It shows you the area, the water, the land area, population, and the stage height and last reported date. Corps of Engineers, they have a whole extensive website and system based around the dams on the main stem of the Missouri River. I couldn't get the entire page in a slide. It goes down about 3 more sections. But the one I really wanted to talk about, or one that I did want to talk about, was the project orders. Pop back and forth. But you can see some of the information that you can pull, not only from our area, but all the way down the system. On the project orders, this is for, which dam? No, the one at Pickstown. Fort Randall Dam, yesterday. This is their daily release schedule, discharge in cubic feet per second. So they're running 12,000, 11,000, 10,000 as time goes on. So they'll be ramping down the river flow over the next 3 days. So if you're doing a multi-day trip on the Missouri River, it's kind of nice to keep this in the back of your mind. Water levels are going to decrease over the next 3 days. This also works during, crazy spring runoff season. They may back their discharge down because of the floodwaters that are coming through as well. And then if you go to waterdata.usgs.gov, they've just revamped their website. It didn't look like this before. But there again, this is the same type of information that you can collect and read off of the different gauging stations throughout South Dakota. And you can pick whichever state that you're interested in. It works all across the country. You can select discharge, gauge height, depth of water level, temperature, or any data, and it'll show all the sites that are available. If you click on, it's the same type of data that you'll get here based on the choices that you select. So now that I've confused everybody, did anyone have any questions? Did that make any sense at all? Did it help? A guy works with it for 20 years and then you forget that not everybody's heard it day in and day out for that long. This picture is the same location the next day of that location, just looking to the right, and you can see the different water levels. I killed it. You can see the different water levels in just a 12-hour period. That's how the dams are releasing the water as you go through.
I have a question.
Yes?
So if they're all at different levels and you've never looked at it before, how do you know if?
The absolute best thing to do is to get on the Facebook page and say, hey, has anybody been down the river recently? What are the conditions like? Numbers are great, experience is even better. That's the best advice that I can give you. I like between 25 and 30,000 CFS on the river in that section, but then that might be lower water levels further down you go when you get into the half-mile wide reaches of the Missouri River. So the best thing to do is ask questions, and don't be afraid to go out there a day early or a half a day early and take a look at the water and see if you want to be out there or not. There's been days where we've said, nah, we're not doing this. And then other days it's like, great, it's awesome, let's go. Any other questions? Yes.
Roger, one thing I'd add too, because great presentation. Keep a river log. Like you said, the gauge isn't relative to typically anything. It's telling you what's going on there. And so if you've taken a trip and it's 6 feet, I didn't really want to be out there, but 4 feet I had a blast. And I've got 40 years of river logs. Everything's in the spreadsheet. You could go back and look and see. And the only time it gets to be a problem is when they discontinue a gauge. You got to start over. But yeah,
right.
If your friends have logged their times and they know their levels, it's unbelievably useful data to have that experience.
Absolutely. I did a river report after our first river run. I did a report for the people who were doing the Fort to Field 50. I'd gone through the week before the race, put a report on Facebook. You think I would have put the numbers on there? I went back and I found that on the website. It's like, I want that. I looked at them, I did that, but I neglected to put that in the report on the page. So next time I do that, somebody asks me where the hell the numbers at. Any other questions, comments? Anyone want to add anything?
I got a comment. We do the same thing on Split Rock Creek, and we want to whitewater on Split Rock Creek, which is up by Garrettson. And we did the same thing. We just recorded ourselves so we knew when it was good and when it was bad.
Okay.
So you go to this site, like say they had a big rain or something in Minnesota, and you go, oh, it's at such and such. Well, it's not going to be any good today. It's running too low. And you might go to another day, well, it's running 1,000 feet per minute. That means it's at flood stage.
Mhm.
you know, is high, and you look at the gauge depth too, so now we know when it's around 700 cubic feet per minute, so, oh, we gotta go. Because on Split Rock Creek, that only happens maybe once or twice a year, maybe not even in a year.
Sure.
So that's exactly what you do, just like you were talking about. You find out where it's good relative to that creek with that information.
Some people have commented on that on the websites. I went to the South Dakota Canoe and Kayak page. I searched the page for Split Rock, and I did find a conversation where someone was talking about that 2.5 to 3.5 feet on that gauge. So that, but more of that information to share with everyone would be very helpful as well.
Yeah, maybe I should share.
My experience from Watertown North, Summit got an 11-inch rain one day, and it took 3 days for the water to get from Summit down to Watertown.
Yeah.
But me and a couple farmers, of course, we gotta go look at this wall of water coming out and taking out fences each mile.
Oh, yeah.
And that was pretty impressive, 11 inches in like 2 hours or 3 hours, something like that. That's a lot of water. Anything else? As long as I'm up here, and I've been thinking about summer, I do have one trip planned for June. And that is March, May, June. June 13th, 14th, and 15th. I will be taking paddlers. We'll be camping at Monfort, in the upper 39. Be taking about 10 miles upstream to Harry's. We'll paddle down to Monfort. We'll camp there tonight, and then that Sunday morning we'll paddle from there down to Running Water. If anyone would like to tag along, whether you want to be a paying customer or just want to be in the group, I'd be more than happy to have you. Let me know, and I'll be around all throughout the meeting if you want a phone number or anything. Eventually, I'd like to do mini rendezvous once a summer up there, just for anybody who wants to come. And with that, that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you on the water.